We're here today to talk about cybersecurity and what organisations can do to help prevent or protect themselves against an attack. And I think it's quite important that, regardless of size, attacks are now indiscriminate as well as targeted, and it's not just large corporations who are at risk. I think we can often overlook how inclusive technology is in our lives now. If you think about it, it's only 10 years ago now since the first iPhone came out, and now it's almost second nature. Everything we do almost on a daily basis involves technology in some way or another. And I think we often overlook just how integrated it is and our reliance on it as well. We all have iPhones and tablets. We all use the internet on a daily basis. A lot of organisations, they trade electronically, and as a result of trading electronically, they store customer data, financial data. So we all embed technology and use technology in one form or another on a daily basis. Cyber is effectively the characteristics of computers, anything to do with computers, information technology, electronic communication. It's just a generic umbrella term for anything computer related, effectively. One of the interesting things about cyber is that the threat is very, very varied and wide. It can range anything from a teenager in a bedroom using some easily available tools to a nation state that could invest tens or hundreds of millions into their cyber offensive and defensive capabilities. But one of the biggest that springs to mind is the WannaCry attack that happened last year. It didn't target anyone in particular. The only thing it targeted was certain versions of Windows that hadn't been patched. And as a result, it did prove that a global attack out there was more than possible. There were over 230,000 victims around the world, and that happened within probably less than 24 hours. The motivation of the threat actors in cyberspace are quite varied. So if you take what we call script kiddies, so script kiddies are commonly teenage hackers who will use tools easily available from the net or on the dark web, for example. They're not experts in coding, so they'll use easily available tools to target, often indiscriminate, often targeted, but quite often their motivation is almost to show off to their peers and potentially attract the attention of maybe larger hacker groups. Then you've got state-sponsored, and state sponsors are effectively the top tier of threat actors because their level of resource is almost unlimited. They're backed by government. So these would be hackers who either are directly employed by the government or would be almost contracted to work for the government. And most governments and nation states deploy both offensive and defensive cyber capabilities. Hacktivists are almost a decentralized group of hackers who will attack victims for political or maybe religious gain. They seek to embarrass their victims rather than undertake serious damage. So again, they've in the past, hacktivists such as Anonymous or LulzSec, for example, have gone after some financial institutions because of some of the things that they have done around who they're going to process money for. One of the major threats is effectively organised crime. Now, organised crime gangs are typically situated in Eastern Europe. They're very well designed, very slick operations. They will have a head of finance, they will have an IT department, they have distribution, they have people who are responsible for washing bitcoins, for example. They're very, very well-oiled machines, and their motivation is primarily just financial gain. So they will move from one victim to another, just seeking money. Cyber terrorist is effectively someone that's motivated typically by religious or political gain, and they will act in support of terrorist organisations. So effectively their organisation is almost between about 16, 17 groups who've declared their support, and they've created a group called the Cyber Caliphate. The insider is almost one of the greatest threats inadvertently. So the insider is effectively almost a twofold situation. You have the accidental insider, so they might inadvertently email some confidential information or some personal information to a third party who may not be the intended recipient. They could lose devices on the bus or on the taxi, for example, laptops, smartphones and the like. Or they could be the malicious insider who goes out there to deliberately damage the company they work for, largely because they're disgruntled about their employment. The term malware means malicious software, and there are a wide range of types of malicious software out there. In February last year, it was noted there were over 90 million new variants, and that was a threefold increase on the year before. So some of the common types of malware range from ransomware, worms, Trojan horses, viruses. A virus, as the name suggests, effectively makes the computer sick. Once the virus has penetrated the computer system, it would have to have some form of user interaction, i.e. opening an attachment or running a program. But then once it does that, it can actually cause physical damage to the computer. It can be used to steal information as well. Worms are often confused with viruses, but there's a difference between a worm and a virus, whereas a virus requires human interaction. So viruses can spread, but they still require human interaction for them to become effective. Worms require no human interaction, and they can just spread across a network without any form of interaction. Again, typically a worm would come through one of the common methods of malware distribution. So it could be a malicious website link, it could be an attachment or a link in an email, or it could be a link in malvertising, which is a malicious website which has a link embedded in it. Spyware, again, is a piece of malware that once it's embedded into the system will effectively capture everything that you do on that computer. So similar spyware keyloggers, where it'll record every keystroke that you make. So if you're accessing login details for banking or your own network, having spyware installed, the threat actor will effectively see everything you do on the computer. Trojan, or a Trojan horse, as the name suggests, is a piece of malware that effectively mimics something else. So it might look as if it's a Word document or it's an Excel spreadsheet, but actually what it contains is some malicious code, some malware inside. But for all intents and purposes, it looks like something that's quite genuine. An example of a Trojan would be if you received a spreadsheet, for example, and when you clicked on that spreadsheet, it then asked you to enable macros. Once you enable those macros in that spreadsheet, then that's effectively the malicious code. People think PDFs are very safe, but again, they're also one of the common means of distributing malware. A common form of web-based attack is a denial of service attack. Now, typically, denial of service attack would involve one computer, which would then deliver an amount of data down to an attacking the website it's attacking, with the sole objective of either taking that website offline or significantly reducing its capacity to operate. The danger, or what is typically involved in a cyber attack, can range from just financials to data. And the data to some people is very personal, and therefore the level of distress can be very, very different. So just because a business doesn't trade financially and transact money via a website, for example, doesn't mean that a business has no cyber risk. They will possibly hold customer data, or just themselves have some form of first-party risk, such as computers or smartphones and tablets. Social engineering is effectively the manipulation of people to do something they wouldn't traditionally or they wouldn't typically do. So quite often social engineering is largely associated with phishing emails, for example. So you might receive a phishing email that would say, please take action, your account details have been lost, log in and change your banking details. And then when you do that, you're actually logging into a malicious website and you're giving your details to the attacker. So in the government's 2017 cyber survey, it showed that 1 in 2 small businesses have been subject to a breach. It is important that you actually have a plan and you do plan for the worst to happen. Under GDPR, which is coming in later this year, the notification time frame is just 72 hours to notify people who've been involved in a breach or notify the regulator depending on the severity of the breach. And if you don't have a plan about how you're going to do that, then that could be very dangerous. The plan is effectively just knowing what to do and who's going to do it, what steps need to be taken, who's responsible for informing the regulator, who's responsible for informing those people whose data is maybe being lost. It's more just having a plan of action rather than in the event of a breach or an attack, all of a sudden you're running around trying to find out what to do and you can lose precious time. The National Cybersecurity Centre have issued the following guidelines for you and your clients that can be implemented to both help reduce the cyber threat and also the impact that a cyber event could have. Back up your data. Identify what data you need to back up. Keep your backups separate from your main computer. Consider the cloud. Read the NCSC Cloud Security Guidance. Make backing up part of your everyday business. Remove data from any storage media before it's passed outside your organisation. Protect your organisation from malware. Install and turn on antivirus software. Prevent staff from downloading potentially dangerous applications. Keep all your IT equipment up to date and regularly patched. Control how USB drives and memory cards can be used. Switch on your firewall. Keep your smartphones and tablets safe. Switch on password protection. Make sure lost or stolen devices can be tracked, locked, or wiped. Keep your device up to date. Keep all your apps up to date. Don't connect to unknown Wi-Fi hotspots. Use passwords to protect your data. Make sure you switch on password protection. Use two-factor authentication for important accounts. Avoid using predictable passwords. Help your staff cope with password overload with password managers. Change all default passwords. Avoid phishing attacks. Configure accounts to reduce the impact of successful attacks. Think about staff training and how you operate. Check for obvious signs of phishing. Report all attacks to the authorities, such as action fraud. Keep up to date with attackers. Have a process to verify online money transactions to third parties. So if you need to further improve your cybersecurity, then you can also seek certification under the government's Cyber Essentials scheme. This has the benefit of demonstrating to your clients or prospective clients that you take the protection of their data seriously. For more information, see cyberesentials.ncsc.gov.uk. So the cyber risk is real and everybody is vulnerable. It's not just something that will happen to the next person or to a large corporation. Everybody is at risk.